Sabiha Gökçen, the war hero, a national symbol of Turkish social progress, was actually an Armenian, a genocide survivor adopted from an orphanage by Atatürk. The diversity in this society was so rare, it was no more punishments for apostasy or other.
I love it.
Used freedom of consciousness.
Love it. All right, chapter 8. Everyone has been asking me to react to this. I'm finally gonna finish it off.
The politician who needs help of religion to govern is nothing but an idiot. For more than 500 years, the rules and theories of ancient Arabic sheikhs, Muhammad, and the absurd interpretations by generations of filthy and ignorant clergy in Turkey. They dictated the state from the constitution, the smallest of activities and gestures of citizens, their diet, the hours of rest and labor, the choice of clothing, the curriculum in schools, our manners and habits, and even our most intimate thoughts. Islam is a rotting corpse that is poisoning all of our lives.
Golly, we're barely a minute into the video, and we're going hard, bruh. Okay, look. Now, what do I have to say about that? Because you know I have to say something about that. Now, objectively speaking, there are things that are set in motion, like rules. The Bible has rules too, although I don't think people really adhere to those rules as strict as Islam, though. There are certain rules set in place for a certain reason. Case in point, the age to drink in America, which is 21. Fun fact, it used to be 18 years old. But it changed. Why? Because, and they even use scientific studies to show this, but when it was 18, people were dying more, causing more accidents upon themselves, and what's not. So they changed it from 18 to 21 because when you're 21, your brain is more developed. Keep in mind, your brain doesn't fully stop growing until 25. But they made a conclusion based on studies, actual scientific studies, that you're less likely to do something dumb when you're 21 drinking versus when you're 18 drinking. That would potentially cause you your life. Why do I say this? Because if I just look at it from an outside perspective, and I see Europeans do this nonsense where they think it's so cool that, oh, I can drink at 14 years old.
In Europe, we can drink at 7 years old. America is so weird for allowing them to drink at 21.
Dude, yeah, it's stupid. So no, there's a reason why rules are set in motion. Okay, certain rules. Although I don't agree with everything that Islam says. Okay, but I'm just saying, I understand it. The logic behind it.
There are many different nations, but there is only one civilization. A prerequisite for the progress within a nation is to be a part of that civilization. There are no differences between the Orient and the Occident. There is only a difference between backwardsness and modernity.
The fez was a traditional Islamic headdress worn by men across the Islamic world. It originated in North Africa, and throughout the 17th and 18th century, it became increasingly widespread throughout the Islamic world. From Indonesia to Morocco, devout Muslim men would wear it just as devout Muslim women would wear the veil. It became the official headgear of the Ottoman army uniform, and even non-Muslims who resided within the Ottoman Empire and Muslims who lived outside of the Ottoman Empire would wear it. It signified loyalty to the Caliph, the Islamic social order, the Ummah, and the Caliph's authority over the
I thought this hat was Jewish.
Islamic world. You can see
I could have sworn this hat was
the cheering.
Oh wait,
as the Turkish Republic.
No, that's too big.
1923.
No,
at that time, 80% of that republic.
I could have sworn Jewish people wear square hats. Am I tripping? I don't know. Somebody like explain that in the comments for me.
90% could neither read nor write. Ideas such as nationalism, republicanism, liberalism, progress, modernity, science, secularism were something most people had never even heard of. A national identity didn't exist, and most group identities were restricted to clans, religious groups, and family structures within rural villages. This was not a population that could carry and advance a revolution, especially since they wouldn't even understand what a revolution was or what they were doing it for, which consequently would shape what Atatürk's revolution would be, one dictated from the top to bottom, and not the other way around as revolutions usually go. This in return would leave behind a legacy of governance enforced autocratically from top to bottom, no matter what the wider rabble may think of it. Within a period of
why am I seeing post-World War II tanks? What?
The world of the average.
This is supposed to be pre-World War I. I'm seeing post.
On its
okay,
head.
World War II tanks.
March
but whatever.
1924, Mustafa Kemal formally abolished the caliphate. This might seem like nothing to you from an outsider's perspective, but remember, the Sultan and the Caliph were two separate institutions. The Sultanate had been abolished 2 years before with the founding of the Republic, but the Caliphate had still existed. There were many sultans throughout the Islamic world throughout its history, but there could only ever be one caliph. The caliph was not a pope of the Islamic world, but considered to be the spiritual descendant of Muhammad and to represent his authority as a religious authority to all Muslims. The caliphate had existed since Islam itself existed. The title had gone from the Umayyads to the Abbasids to the Ottomans and was seen as an integral part of the Islamic faith and the understanding of the Ummah as a community of Muslims in the world under a leader. And
okay, that reminds me of how drawing a parallel here, Barbados used to be a monarchy up until 2021, very recently, literally only December 30th of 2021, so barely like 3 years ago. We had Queen Elizabeth II as our queen, but when we abolished the monarchy, it was just like the Sultanate here, it was abolished. Like the system is still the same. It's just that that system is just, you know, redundant. Now, granted, the government completely abolished the monarchy without the saying of the people. Actually, the flag that you see right here behind me is a flag that was blessed to us by Queen Elizabeth II, the late Queen Elizabeth II. So no, this is not just a random flag. Okay, and also I have this flag up to support the fact that I am a monarchist. Actually, I could have used the Queen's personal Barbadian flag, but I was like, no, nah. I'm gonna use something that actually has more meaning to it, and it's much more easier to understand. But I'm just bringing all that up because I see like similar parallels here. That's like, oh wait, this is kind of like how it was in Barbados. Because I remember when they abolished the monarchy, they were like, oh, do we need to change the flag? Do we need to like change the freaking country's name? Oh shit, bro. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, no, you don't need to do any of that. Like, the country's still the same, you know? It's just that the monarchy is just gone, you right? So, oh my goodness. But actually, though, they didn't even, like, okay, they changed, like, variants. Like, this flag here isn't used anymore. Well, technically, it still is. They basically just put they just put the coat of arms in the middle of the flag. We still use the St. George's cross. They didn't bother to completely change it. So no, again, because we like to keep our heritage, our English/British heritage. Okay, if you're wondering what this flag is specifically, though, it's just an ensign. So,
with one stroke of a pen and the presidential proclamation, Mustafa Kemal abolished it. Gone was a central element of the Islamic world, an authority to all Muslims and their understanding of themselves as a group identity and part of a community that had existed for over 1,000 years. The consequences of this decision were monumental. Mustafa Kemal
How did he
promised
even have the
Kurds
authority to
protect
do
the
that?
caliphate in the War of Independence, which resulted in the first split between the Kurds and the Turks. But the consequences were even larger beyond the Turkish Republic. It completely
yikes.
shattered a key element in how many people in the Muslim world saw and understood themselves. What are we now? Who are we? What is our tribe? Our identity, our community? Are we still Muslims? Can Islam persist without the caliphate?
This will be
Are we
very
nationalists?
problematic.
Are we Asians? Are we Africans? Are we Arabs? Are we Iranian? Are we races? Are we comrades? Are we a community? Can Jews or Christians be part of our community? Can we live with Hindus? Are we kings? Are we republicans? Are we back in the 6th century? What? Where? Who? How? Many, if not most, of the problems throughout the Islamic countries in identity, politics, and nationality can be traced back to this fateful moment. From Gamal Abdel Nasser's proclamations of Arab nationalism, to Iran's Shah proclaiming himself to be a living god, to Jinnah founding a separate Muslim nation in India, to anti-Semitic pogroms in Iraq and Morocco, to the Saudis dragging their society back into the late Iron Age. On the 4th of April 1996, when Muhammad
Late Iron Age? What does he mean by that? Saudi Arabia is a very modern society. What? How is Saudi Arabia pulling their society to the late Iron Age? I don't know. You see, guys, here's the thing, right? I don't know. Like, I've heard Kraut is like Islamophobic. I don't know. Like, so far I've seen he's been very objective, but I don't know. Some things kind of feel like personal. Because what does he mean by Saudi Arabia going back to Iron Age? Is what? Saudi Arabia is probably like one of the most modern cities in the entire region that it's around. What? Not cities, but like, you know, has the most modern like cities in the region.
Muhammad Omar founded the Taliban, he broke open the chest of the cloak inside the Shrine of the Cloak in Kandahar, Afghanistan, where Muhammad's cloak had been kept for centuries, and wrapped himself in it, proclaimed before his followers that he was the legitimate representative of Muhammad, the Caliph of all Muslims, leader of the new caliphate, and that the false gods of nationalism, democracy, and communism had failed. Events echoed when bin Laden proclaimed his war to restore the caliphate to the black flags recently flying over Iraq and Syria. It is still too early to say what the full consequences of Mustafa Kemal's decision were when he abolished an institution that he thought of as too backwards to be reformed and therefore had to be destroyed.
How did he have credibility to do that? Because like he said, the caliph is a spiritual thing. If he just simply removed the caliph from Turkey, wouldn't that just simply move on to someone else? There's a bunch of other Muslims out there or other Muslim countries. So how does he have the credibility to do that? Sure, remove the caliph from Turkey, yeah, but like the caliph is still like, that's literally out of his jurisdiction. So how in the world does he? That doesn't make any sense to me, like, actually.
Make no mistake about the tremendous impact that this decision had throughout the world. But for Mustafa Kemal, that decision was just the starting shot. He followed it up by banning the fez, turbans, niqab, and burqa, and the criminal penalty. The hijab was banned in public spaces such as schools and government buildings, and women who throughout most of the history of the Islamic world had been silent figures forced into the background by religion were told to come forward and be public beings and figures. This was followed by the closing of all Islamic schools. Keep in mind that at the time, all schools were Islamic schools, and the Sunni clergy held a monopoly on education. This was now over. New schools were opened. The curriculum was entirely secular. Religion was scrapped entirely out of education, and education was compulsory, and far more radical, it was also compulsory for girls, who had previously, due to Islamic customs, been denied any and all education. This was followed by all women being granted and guaranteed legal equality before the law. And that was followed by the abolition of the Islamic calendar. It was no longer the year 1344, but the year 1925.
Whoa!
As it was throughout the rest of the non-Muslim world.
Wait, Islam had its own calendar? That's news to me. Also, okay, I was letting it play before I say something. that's great and all what he's doing, but like, what about the people who actually want to adhere to their religious policies, guys? Because there's a bunch of women who will willfully wear a hijab how they want to. So you banning that, like, the idea behind it is perfect, but the way it's being implemented is kind of icky. If you're just outright banning it, you're kind of just repressing the people who actually want to follow their religious practices. Like, what, like, you see where I'm going with this? Like, you're forcing every single person to, like, what? I thought you just, like, it would make more sense if it was just like, oh, well, you know, the laws, because back then, you know, countries had it where women were required to wear hijabs. I thought the laws would be like, oh, if the women, like, women weren't required to, but if they want to, then they can. That would make more sense. But no, this is just ban, ban, ban, ban, ban. Like, what? Like, okay.
Next, he abolished Sharia law in its totality in each and every corner of the legal code, be it civil or criminal law. No more special taxes for non-Muslims, no more restrictions of freedoms, no more prohibition of alcohol, no more punishments for apostasy or other.
I love it.
Introduced freedom of consciousness. Love
it, love it, love it, love it, love it.
Convert to other faiths, or even openly leave their faith and be open atheists. Marriages between faiths and lack of faiths were now legal without a spouse being forced to convert, as it would have been under Sharia.
I have a bunch of Muslims who watch my videos, and let me tell you this. The amount of Muslims who try to defend stuff like the jizya tax, if I'm not pronouncing that right, but whatever, but just any and everything like that, literally any wrongdoings from anything affiliated under Islam, like the amount of people trying to defend that, it's a ridiculous amount. Like when I reacted to slavery in the caliphate, and I had, bro, no way I had so many people trying to justify that to me, bro. Like what the world? Like, nah, bro.
Mixed faith couples could now raise children together, which was forbidden under Sharia. The Islamic courts, Sharia justices, and the Sheikh al-Islam, the highest religious legal authority in the land, were all abolished. He introduced a civil code of criminal and civil laws, shaped after examples set in Europe and North America, the first, and so far, only majority Muslim country to ever do so. Next, he banned the call to prayer from minarets at mosques. Next, all imams became state bureaucrats on government payroll, under control by a secular government institution. What could and could not be preached during religious sermons had to be approved by the state. Preaching in Arabic was abolished and had to be conducted in the Turkish language. Next, the Turkish alphabet was Latinized. The old Persian Arabic alphabet was replaced at all state and commercial institutions and schools. All adults who could read and write had to learn the new alphabet. All who couldn't read or write were taught to read and write with the new alphabet. All children would be raised with the new alphabet. Government advisors cautioned Mustafa Kemal to do this slowly and that it could only be done over the course of a decade. But Mustafa Kemal persisted and had this reform pushed through in 5 months. Next, all...
Golly, 5 months? 5 months. 5 months. Brother, you know what I was gonna say? I was gonna say, if you truly wanted to, like, really make, like, Turkey, he should have added the old Turkey alphabet that the Turks, I don't know, abandoned. But yes, he wants to liberalize Turkey. He wants Turkey to be more westernized. So it makes sense why he chose the Latin alphabet. So, but still though, I think it would be more appropriate had he used like the old Turk alphabet. I don't know. I feel like the reason why like he probably did it is because it reads from right to left, that would be really hard to get used to. I'm not gonna lie, because switching from one alphabet to another, it's not as hard. Now that I think about it, it's not as insane, because like, take me as an example. When I started teaching myself Russian, I had to learn Cyrillic, or the Russian alphabet. And when I say Russian alphabet, I'm not saying Cyrillic is the Russian alphabet, because Russian alphabet has like words that aren't in like the original Cyrillic alphabet, which is Bulgarian that created that. It took me like a month, technically a week, to like learn the words in the Russian alphabet, but it took me like a month to get used to that. So with that logic, I mean, these people already speak the language, so you're basically it's just an alphabetical change. It's really not that hard to get used to, really and truly. No. Yeah, 5 months is probably more than enough to really and truly like kind of get used to that. You know, by the time 5 months, that's like becoming second nature to you at that point. Yeah. So
Turks had to take last names. Until then, people throughout the Islamic world had mostly only had one or two names, but there was no such thing as a last name or a family name.
What the hell?
Kemal changed that and took the last name Atatürk, which means the father of the Turks. He was the only one to take this name, and since he had no children, he would, in Turkish history, be the one and only father of the Turks. Next, Islam as the official religion of the state was cut out.
He probably did that on purpose too. That's probably why he called himself that. Like, I ain't gonna have no kids. Nah, that was 100% purpose, so you cannot tell me no other fact.
The Republic's constitution. This was then followed by secularism being written into the constitution, defining the Turkish Republic as a state that separates religion and state. And there's a note to be made here. The Turkish word for secularism is laikik, which is a francophone, a French loanword in the Turkish language based on the French term laïcité. And that is important because French secularism...
Okay, before we talk about French secularism, guys, I didn't even know Turkey was a secular country. Or better yet, I didn't really know what secularism was until our lovely Turkish friend, Effie, wonderful guy, had to tell me that Turkey is secular. Well, no, I thought Turkey was like a country where Islam was like the state religion. But then he was like, oh no. Oh my goodness. He had to correct me on that. And I was like, wait, what? The thing is I heard what secularism was. Like, I heard the term before, but the term never like permanently stayed with me. I heard the term being thrown around way too many times, and I just never knew what the freaking term meant.
Isn't your average secularism. While most modern republics define the separation of religion and state as a freedom of religion, in which citizens are free to worship, believe and practice their faith, and even base their politics on their religious beliefs as long as they don't force them upon others, French separation of religion and state, which is called laïcité, is defined as freedom from religion, in that you, the citizen, are freed from religion by the state. It bans religious dress from all government and public institutions, be they parliament or school. It forbids any and all religiously inspired or dictated social policy, be they through private organizations or elected officials. This uniquely French interpretation of secularism.
I don't really think the whole abortion thing is religion-inspired kraut. No, you don't need to be religious to have an opinion on abortion. What? What the hell? What? No. No, that is a very intellectually offensive thing to say there, crowd. Abortion has nothing to do with religion. What? People just argue against abortion using religion. because the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, plain and simple. But abortion is not like the Bible doesn't freaking say, oh, you cannot, no, you cannot abort. No. I don't know where the hell crowd got that from, talking about some abortion is like only a religious thing. What the hell?
Derived from the French revolutions and its thinkers like Auguste Comte, is controversial to this day, as it gives the French government the authority to restrict religious expression in public, such as banning the burkini and burqa under criminal penalty. It also gives the French government to restrict private religious programs and activities that the state determines.
I don't really like the sound of that.
A pseudo-medical procedure known as gay conversion therapy in France is punished with a $60,000 fine and a 2-year prison sentence. Laïcité is far more invasive and has a more hands-on approach to the separation of state and religion than in most other republics and democracies. And it is this type of separation of religion and state which Atatürk adopted for his new republic.
Bro, what the hell? No. No. Again, the idea behind it makes sense. Does that sound familiar? If it sounds familiar, because that's literally what I said about the whole Armenian issue. The idea made sense, but the way how it's done, it's no. Like, again, there's genuine people who want to and should be able to express themselves, who want to follow the practices of their religion, and they should be able to do that. What the hell, France? Ooh, I don't like that.
Turkish society was torn down to then be rebuilt and modeled after the European states of the time. But Atatürk didn't just want to catch up with the modernity of his neighbors, he wanted to outdo them. But where could he? In what regard were European and American nations still lagging behind in progress? These were for most modern states technologically advanced with legal equality for all men, but mostly only for men. At the turn of the decade, women's equality movements had sprung into action as they had never before in human history. This is where Atatürk saw an opportunity.
Did she pay attention to that? Women's equality sprung into action never seen before in human history. Yeah, why? That's not a coincidence, buddy. Yeah, because as soon as life started to get more comfortable, more better, all of a sudden, women now decide, yeah.
We want equality now. Yeah, Now that life is actually getting more comfortable and better to live in, we want those privileges that you men have, right?
Dude. Okay. Women, for the most part. Look, we're talking about Western women because this video and this example is about Turkey basically westernizing itself and whatnot. So I'm using Western women. Western women, through all of history until very recently, willfully stayed at home, cook, clean, do all that. They chose that. Why? It was the most comfortable option. It was the best option. Why? Because quality of life throughout most of history was shite. It was trash. You had wars. You had diseases. Oh my gosh, dude. I don't even need to explain how quality of life was trash. Everybody watching this reaction should know that. I don't need to explain that. That's why women willfully stayed at home and just took care of the kids. But then as soon as the very same men, or before I even say that, I should better say that's why men had the privileges that they had. Because literally, it wasn't even a privilege, really and truly. It was more so responsibility. Right? Example. I have the responsibility of being a grown adult, making sure that A, I'm healthy, and B, I constantly have money. Basic things that most adults have. A child doesn't have that. A child doesn't, a legal minor doesn't have that. That is for the parents to do. Why? Because the child isn't old enough to fend for itself yet. But from a kid's perspective, actually, we were all children. I bet all of us thought like this. We all thought, oh my gosh, being an adult is so cool. You could do this, you could do that, you could do the next, blah, blah, blah. We all thought like that. But then now, as we're all adults, we see the true reality of it. It's not sunshine and rainbows. Yes, we can do all of those things, but there's a catch. A big catch. You have to be extremely responsible. You have to be extremely frugal if you're living. So, again, the same logic here. I'm not even going to delve into that example because all of us can literally relate as a child where we all wish to be an adult. As so many adults now are wishing to be children again, where they didn't have to worry much about anything. Fact, not an opinion. So when you're an adult, right, you have these so-called privileges. It would seem like privileges, right? To a kid, it looks like a privilege. But to an adult, you know damn well that's not a privilege. You know damn well it's far from a privilege. So it was the same logic with women and men. Men had to do a whole bunch of shit. And women had to just merely stay at home and cook and clean. That's it. But when those men finally made life so much more comfortable, so much more better to live in, oh, women decided, all right, things are getting better. I don't need to sit my ass in this home anymore. I'm gonna go and fight for my rights. Yeah. Now, before you come in my comments, or if you haven't unsubscribed yet, do not call me sexist, because I am not. Plenty of times I have advocated for women. I have spoke for women. Plenty of times. Okay, I literally even spoke for women in my recent Origins of Centralization by Crowd video, where I talked about how we need to stop hypersexualizing women and we need to stop objectifying women. Plenty of times, okay, because we live in such a hypocrisy that you barely say one critique about women, sexist, you lose your job, nobody wants to hire you. That's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah. It's the same parallel, the same logic, bruh. Freaking, when you're an adult, you have to literally break your back to get those so-called privileges. But as a kid, you don't have to do shit. The adult has to do that for you. The adult has to take care of you. Keep you fed. Make sure that you are clothed. Make sure that you are healthy. Otherwise, they'll get put in jail. It was the same logic. Pretty much. Or extremely similar logic. Men had to do the same thing. Now, I see the jokes and the memes where people are like, oh, men used to freaking beat their wives, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that is true. But men still had to take care of the women that they had to, like, not all men went and just freaking beat their freaking wives and whatnot, you know what I'm saying? Like, they still had to take care of the women too. It's not like the men were out and about having these so-called privileges and not doing anything, not using said privileges to improve the woman's life. No, they were using said privileges to also help the woman and, you know, their kid. So,
opportunity to show off the progress of his new society to the outside world, and to even hint on how his new republic might soon overtake all the others. In the decades before, the Ottomans had made a point of showing off their princes to the outside world as symbols of the empire. Ataturk turned this on its head. He adopted several young girls who showed promise in education and accomplishments, such as Afet İnan and Sabiha Gökçen. Afet İnan became an accomplished anthropologist and historian. Sabiha Gökçen became the world's first Air Force pilot, and they both were presented throughout the world as symbols of progress within the Turkish Republic. Most countries represent themselves through national symbols, such as a national animal. Within this concept of national symbols, France is unique as it represents itself as a woman, the famous Marianne leading the revolution. Atatürk decided that the symbol of Turkey was to be a modern, dark-haired Turkish woman leading the nation to progress. These were the images that Atatürk wanted the world to see. No longer should Turkey be seen as this weird backward nation where veiled women are hidden behind closed doors, but a forward-thinking republic where a female president of a university and acclaimed historian can congratulate American women on receiving the right to vote and finally being the equals of their Turkish sisters.
Equal. Equal. Fun fact, right? Yeah, so-called equality. Yeah, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, women aren't required to sign up for the draft. They're not required to have mandatory military services. Guys, I got my draft notice, I don't know, a couple weeks ago that they already put my ass in selective services for the U.S. Armed Forces. And I'm 20. So if war ever breaks out, I'm the first group to get my ass sent to be killed. And you know what? As soon as we got that letter, we were like, we're going back home to Barbados as soon as possible. You think I'm gonna get my ass killed for this country? Especially with the whole heightened Taiwan issues. Oh, hell nah. You got me messed up, bro. You got me messed up. This country has done absolutely nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. I honestly could have had this YouTube channel in my country as well, okay? Because Barbados is literally no different from America. Barbados is literally called the America of the Caribbean for a reason. Okay, I literally could have had this whole entire setup in Barbados as well. In fact, it would be much more better if I was in freaking Barbados, because if I was in Barbados right now, I would literally go around the island and just record historical sites and make videos about that. Because Barbados has a shitload of undiscovered history that most people that aren't from a Commonwealth nation, not even many Commonwealth people, know the history of Barbados. Okay, knows, right? So.
Çünkü siyasi haklarını tamamen kazanmışlardır. Türk kadınları da şimdiye kadar aldıkları haklarıyla iktifa etmeyeceklerdir.
One of Atatürk's biggest projects was his new...
We want to be equal when life finally starts to get better. And you know what? I don't even care. Look, let me tell you something. As much as you can say what you want about women, at the end of the day, bro, it is still men who allowed all this shit to happen, so...
Capital. At first, there was confusion.
This is all men's fault.
The capital.
No, I'm not saying that women shouldn't have like equal rights. Everybody deserves equal opportunity. 100%. We're all human beings. Definitely.
Istanbul to Ankara. Istanbul had been one of the world's most important metropolis for millennia. Ankara was comparatively nothing. A small town with a population of barely 30,000. But this was done for good reason. Compared to Istanbul, which had geographically been a central location in the larger empire, Ankara was geographically more central within the geography of the new republic. It was easier to access, had the only rail network leading into the south, and contained the headquarters of the army. But more importantly, the small size also served another purpose for Atatürk. He could build a new city for a new state in a new century. At a time when modernist architects were persecuted by fascist movements in Europe, Atatürk invited many of them, such as Clemens Holzmeister and Paul Bonatz, to come into a Turkish exile and build a new capital with him. What they built...
Wait, why were architectures persecuted? What the hell? I've never heard of this.
...was the futuristic Ankara that we know today. Detached from many concepts of traditional Middle Eastern style of buildings, a modern European metropolis was stamped out of the ground. If you visit the city today, you will find the symbols of another cultural revolution that took place here, manifested in architecture. Best symbolized with the Road of Lions, because these lions are imitations of 10,000-year-old Hittite bronze figurines.
That's
Added
sick.
to that, the coat of
That
arms
is
that
sick.
Atatürk chose for his new city was a Hittite sun wheel, and the Road of Lions is also not far away from the newly built Turkish National Museum, filled with Hittite, Assyrian, Persian, Greek, Roman, and nomadic artifacts. This might seem small to you from an outsider's perspective, but symbolized another monumental break from traditions and customs in Islamic societies. Before Atatürk, pre-Islamic cultures and relics were considered to be barbaric or even as sacrilegious or demonic by Islamic societies. In Arabia, ancient pre-Islamic castles and temples are being destroyed to this very day. Atatürk's new vision for his new state required the forging of a new national Turkish identity, and that new identity based on nationality, heritage and language made the ancient pre-Islamic civilizations part of that national identity. The Turks were to no longer just see themselves and identify themselves as just a part of a wider Islamic community, but to take pride in an identity with a wider historic legacy that included nomadic horsemen and ancient Anatolian civilizations.
I mean, those technically Hittite history isn't really Turkish history, but I don't know. I doubt there's any type of Hittite heritage that still lingers on to this day within Turkey.
All of these reforms, the complete restructuring and reorganizing of a society in such a radical way like it had almost never been done before or since in human history, happened within 14 years, between 1923 and 1937. The goal behind them was to create a modern state shaped after a European republic. But precisely the problem there is that republics are more often than not societies with a right to self-determination for the individual. Ask yourself this: is a society that forces you to not be religious any better than a society that forces you to be religious?
They're both
You might
equally
find
bad.
Forced political religiosity and religious doctrine more contemptible than forced secularism.
Bro, they're both bad. That's not a hard question to answer.
Remains the force.
Yeah, exactly.
Erziehungsdiktatur is a term coined by the German historian Harald Neubert, who spent the final years of his academic career trying to figure out why the Soviet Union had failed. The word basically translates to educational dictatorship, or the educating dictatorship. The idea is that the state was ruled by an ideological minority who found their legitimacy not through public approval but within their own beliefs, and saw it as their role to rule as dictators until the public would finally be educated enough to see the validity of those beliefs and elect them through their own volition. However, in the Soviet Union, the dictatorial experience merely educated the people into rejecting that ideology. Atatürk's state was in many ways such an educational dictatorship. Atatürk saw himself as the first and last dictator of Turkey, the one dictator that the nation needed to educate it into never having another dictator again after him.
Okay. Low key, you know what that reminds me of? You know what that reminds me? This reminds me of Singapore. Singapore did this shit, and it worked actually. Now look at Singapore now. And this reminds me of Putin in Russia. Putin is authoritarian, but it's like necessary, bro. It's like necessary. It's honestly necessary, 100%. That's the thing. Dictatorships don't mean bad. It don't always mean bad. It depends on who the dictator is. Dictatorships are bad when the dictator doesn't give a shit about his country. But when the dictator does care about his country, it's usually not bad.
The problem he had was putting this into effect. In 1925, he encouraged opposition figures to found a liberal opposition party with the intention of gradually democratizing society. However, seeing this as a weakness, disgruntled remnants of the Young Turks attempted to assassinate him, and the Kurdish Sheikh Said launched a rebellion to overthrow the republic, to reinstitute Sharia and re-establish the caliphate. The project of Turkish
Bro, I'm gonna talk about the whole Kurdish thing in a different video.
democracy was put on rest, and Atatürk responded with harsh measures, executing the remaining Young Turk leaders and launching a heavy military crackdown against the Kurds. It was after this that he somewhat backtracked his previously more radical positions.
We believe that religion, which for the longest times has been used as an instrument of politics, must be liberated from politics to be elevated. We cannot abuse our holy faiths as instruments of politics.
It is unclear how sincere he may have been when making this statement. Atatürk himself had stopped practicing Islam in 1923, but besides the conflict with the religious population, the Kurdish uprising of 1925 also exposed other problems with the new vision of the Turkish national identity. The fact that it was built on a new nationalist identity formed exclusively around the Turkish language, heritage and culture. It left no room for Kurds, thereby sowing the seeds for inevitable future conflicts. It was an idea that left no room for any cultural, lingual and to some extent even political aberrations. However, the pluralism that Atatürk wished for this society to achieve requires such aberrations and diversity to exist. To ensure that his vision for the future after him would be safe, Atatürk established the National Security Council, an institution of generals that had the expressed permission to intervene in the politics of the country by force if the constitution of the secular republic was ever under threat of being undermined.
Oh, I heard about this. But I didn't know much details about this actually. I heard about this from 2017, if that was the correct date. When Erdogan, the coup d'etat that was attempted against Erdogan, I was like, whoa, what the hell? I was a kid back then. I was pretty damn young. 2017, bro. I was only like 12 years freaking old. But when the coup against Erdogan happened, I saw people were saying that's legal. Like in the Turkish constitution, that's literally legal. And that the army is literally there to prevent the dictator from garnering too much power and becoming too authoritarian and eventually totalitarian, right? But I didn't really know much detail. And not only that, Erdogan had so much support back then, which also threw me off because I was thinking to myself, wait a minute. If the army is supposed to do that when the dictator is becoming way too authoritarian, way too totalitarian, then why does he have so much support by the people, right? Which is funny now, because now that I look at it now, if I'm not wrong, Erdogan is very unpopular now lately, and it's now like, wait, you supported him back then? What? Like what? Not, people are accusing him of being authoritarian and too dictatorial, which is hilarious because, again, I'm like thinking to myself, wait, isn't that what the army back then tried to prevent it, but the people sided with Erdogan instead of the army? Like what? Like, if the army is trying to overthrow him, like, shouldn't that be like a wake-up call? Like, hey, something's wrong with this guy? Look, bro, if you are a Turkish person, you have full permission to explain all of that, this system, the whole situation with the whole Erdogan coup, and the whole, like, situation with him. Now, you just explain it all, just enlighten me in the comments, okay?
A role usually given to civil opposition and the Supreme Court was thereby handed to the army, guaranteeing even more future conflict potential. The cracks in all of this would show at some point. Decades later, it would be revealed that Sabiha Gökçen, the war hero, a national symbol of Turkish social progress, was actually an Armenian, a genocide survivor adopted.
Oh,
the diversity in this society, it was just hidden behind the scenes.
I have people in my comments who try to freaking deny the Armenian genocide, bro. How do you explain that, bro?
Mustafa Kemal Atatürk died on the 10th of November 1938 at 9:05 in the morning. It is an easy historic date and time to remember, because every year on the 10th of November at 9:05 in the morning, the sirens go off in all Turkish cities and towns, and everyone stops in their tracks for a minute of silence. For outsiders,
He's
it all
not.
might seem
He's
somewhat
moving.
weird to observe, almost like a personality cult in a dictatorship.
Not really. This isn't weird.
But this is really
Actually, wait, no. I'm not an outsider. I actually know the history behind all this, so nah.
not the case. Ataturk is genuinely revered by the Turkish people,
Rightfully
who
so.
to this day see him as the savior of their nation, and the
Rightfully
founder
so.
of their modern society.
Yeah,
To this
rightfully
day,
so.
They go to his memorial in Ankara in the millions to pay their respects. Years ago,
Deserved.
when I first looked into this topic and had a conversation with a Turkish friend, I commented on how weird
That
it was
is
to me
sick.
that Mustafa Kemal called himself the father
That
of the
is-
Turks, and was
that is
abruptly
so
interrupted
freaking
by
cool.
a, "No, we call him the father of the Turks." As we go forward into the story of the Republic, you will find that Ataturk's shadow dominates over this state and its people throughout their journey through the 20th century. No other political figure would have as much of an impact on this country as he did until 2003.
Wait, what happened in 2003? 2000. What happened in 2003? What happened in 2003? Whatever. Somebody explain that to me in the comments. Anyways, look, man, if you made it all the way here to the end of this video and you're new to my channel, you like my reaction, subscribe. If you're an active viewer of mine or a regular person and you have videos like this on Turkey that you want me to react to, comment the video in the description below and eventually I will do it. This series was originally a suggestion to me. If you want your suggestions to be done quicker, I recommend you become a channel member for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 cents a month for active viewers. You get a lot of perks, but the main ones being quicker responses to comments and your suggestions are done quicker. And we need one more member until I get a Discord server. We have 6 members, just need one more member until we reach 7 members. And why am I gonna make a Discord server? Because again, communications can be much more easier, your suggestions can be done much more quicker, no hassle, and a bunch of other, like, basically a small hangout place, I guess, or whatever. So check out my other Turkey reactions on my channel, man. Turn the bell notifications on after you subscribe. Thank you for watching and goodbye.